The stars looked different from 7B. Dr. Park had lived on this distant mining colony for 3 years now, and she still found herself staring at the unfamiliar sky every night. Earth was so far away that its sun was just another tiny dot among millions, but this place had become home. The colony was small. Only 847 humans lived here, working the asteroid belts that circled the planet. They mined rare minerals that Earth and the other human colonies needed badly. The work was hard and the days were long, but the people were good. They had built something real on this cold, distant rock. Was a geologist. She studied the rocks and helped the miners find the best places to dig. Her younger brother, Corporal Park, worked as a security guard at the colony. There was not much for security to do out here. No one ever came to 7B except supply ships from Earth every few months. The galaxy was a big place, and humanity was still new to it. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of 47 alien species, controlled most of the known galaxy. They had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented fire. To them, humanity was like a baby learning to walk. They allowed humans to build colonies and mine asteroids, but they never treated them as equals. Humans were tolerated, not respected. Did not think about politics much. She just wanted to do her work and spend time with her brother when she could. Tonight, they had dinner together in the small cafeteria. The food was not great, but the company was good. "You look tired," said, pushing his rice around his plate. "I am tired," admitted. "We found a new mineral deposit today, very deep underground. It will take months to reach it." "At least you have job security," her brother joked. They laughed together. It was a simple moment, a normal moment. Neither of them knew it would be one of their last peaceful memories. The attack came at 3:47 hours, colony time. Was asleep in her small room when the first explosion shook the building. She fell out of bed and hit the floor hard. Alarms started screaming. Red emergency lights filled the darkness. For a moment she thought it was an accident. Maybe a fuel tank had exploded or a mining drill had hit something unstable. Then she heard the second explosion, and the third, and the fourth. She ran to her window and looked outside. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. Ships filled the sky, huge dark shapes blocking out the stars. They were not human ships. They were nothing like any ship had ever seen. They were organic-looking, with curved surfaces that seemed almost alive. And from these ships, beams of bright plasma fire rained down on the colony. Buildings exploded. People ran screaming through the streets. Bodies lay on the ground, some of them still burning. They had heard stories about the Dominion. They were a predatory species that lived outside the Galactic Concord's territory. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who got in their way. They had no treaties with humanity. They had no reason to respect human lives. And now they were here, destroying everything. Grabbed her emergency bag and ran out of her room. The hallway was full of smoke and panicking people. She pushed through the crowd, trying to find her brother. Would know what to do. He was trained for emergencies. She found him near the security office. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but he was alive. He was helping people move toward the underground bunkers. He shouted when he saw her, "Get to the bunkers now." "What about the emergency beacon?" she asked. "We have to call for help." His face was grim. "The communication tower was hit in the first attack. I don't know if it still works." Made a decision. She was not a soldier. She was not brave. But she was the closest person to the backup communication station, and she knew how to use it. "I'm going," she said. No, tried to grab her arm, but she was already running. The backup station was in a small building on the edge of the colony. Ran through streets filled with fire and death. She saw things she would never forget. A mother holding her dead child. An old man trying to crawl away from a burning building. A soldier, tall and insect-like, shooting civilians as they ran. She kept running, Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she did not stop. A plasma bolt hit the ground near her feet. The heat was terrible. She stumbled and fell, cutting her face on broken glass. Blood ran into her eyes, but she got up and kept going. The backup station was still standing. She could not believe her luck. She pushed through the door and found the emergency beacon. Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely press the buttons. The beacon was designed for exactly this situation. It would send a distress signal at maximum power, reaching across the stars to the nearest human fleet. But the nearest fleet was 9 hours away at maximum speed. 9 hours. Could anyone survive that long? Activated the beacon. The machine hummed to life. A small light turned green, showing that the signal was transmitting. She grabbed the microphone. Her voice was shaking, but she forced herself to speak. "This is 7B Mining Colony. We are under attack, unknown alien ships. They are killing everyone. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We need help now. They are." The wall behind her exploded, flew across the room and hit the floor. Her ears were ringing. She could not hear anything. She looked up and saw a soldier standing in the hole where the wall used to be. It was tall, nearly 3 meters, with dark green skin and multiple arms. Its eyes were cold and empty, like the eyes of a spider. It raised its weapon, closed her eyes, and waited to die. The shot never came. Instead, she heard gunfire, human gunfire. She opened her eyes and saw the soldier falling, holes torn through its body. Stood in the doorway, his rifle smoking. He was bleeding from new wounds, but he was still standing. "I told you to go to the bunkers," he said, his voice tight with pain and fear. "I had to send the signal," whispered. Looked at the beacon. The green light was still on. The signal was still transmitting. Somewhere out there among the stars, human ships would be receiving their message. Help would come. But first, they had to survive. Pulled to her feet, she cried out in pain. Something was wrong with her leg, maybe broken. Put her arm around his shoulder and started half carrying her toward the bunkers. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can try," she said. Around them, the colony was dying. More than half the buildings were on fire. Drop ships were landing in the streets, releasing more soldiers. The screams of the dying mixed with the roar of explosions and the crack of weapons fire. But the beacon was still transmitting. The SOS was still calling out into the darkness. 9 hours. They just had to survive for 9 hours. Somewhere in the stars, humanity would hear their cry, and humanity would answer. They always did. Admiral Lee was having his morning coffee when the distress signal arrived. He was aboard the UHS Indomitable, the flagship of the 3rd Human Fleet, currently stationed near the system. It was supposed to be a quiet day. Routine patrols, paperwork, nothing special. Then his communications officer burst onto the bridge with a pale face and shaking hands. "Admiral," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Priority 1 distress signal from 7B. Set down his coffee cup slowly. Priority 1 meant lives were in danger. Priority 1 meant immediate response required. He had not received a Priority 1 signal in over 5 years. "Play it," he ordered. The bridge fell silent as the recording played. The voice of a young woman filled the room, raw with fear and pain. "This is 7B Mining Colony. We are under attack, unknown alien ships. They are killing everyone. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We need help now. They are." The message cut off with the sound of an explosion. Listen to it again, and again. Each time the fear in that woman's voice burned deeper into his heart. Those were his people out there, human beings, civilians, miners trying to make a living on a distant rock. And someone was killing them. He stood up from his command chair. His officers were watching him, waiting for orders. They had all heard the message. They all knew what it meant. "Navigation," said his voice calm but hard as steel. Plot a course for 7B, maximum burn. Admiral, his executive officer, spoke up carefully. 7B is 9 hours away at maximum speed. If we push the engines that hard. Then push them harder, interrupted. Every minute we save is a life we might save. Do it. The officer nodded and began giving orders. Within 10 minutes, every ship in the Third Fleet was changing course. 12 warships, turning away from their patrol routes, burning toward a small mining colony that most of them had never heard of. But knew that 12 ships would not be enough. He did not know who was attacking 7B, but the distress signal had said ships, not ship. This was not a single pirate vessel. This was an invasion force. He walked to the communication station. Open a channel to Fleet Command, Priority 1, all frequencies. The communication officer's fingers flew across the console. Channel open, Admiral. Took a deep breath. What he was about to do might end his career. It might start a war, but he did not care. Those were human lives at stake, and there was nothing in the galaxy more important than that. "This is Admiral Lee of the Third Fleet," he said, his voice broadcasting across human space. At 3:47 hours this morning, 7B mining colony transmitted a Priority 1 distress signal. They are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Civilians are being murdered. I am issuing a general call to all human vessels in range. Every ship that can reach 7B is ordered to respond. Warships, cargo haulers, civilian transports. If you have an engine and weapons, you come. If you have an engine and no weapons, you come anyway. We need medical ships. We need rescue vessels. We need every human being who can help. 7B is 9 hours away. We are coming. All of humanity is coming. Lee out. He cut the transmission and turned to find his officers staring at him in shock. "Admiral," his executive officer said slowly, "you just ordered the entire civilian fleet." "I made a request," corrected. "I cannot order civilians to do anything." He paused, a grim smile on his face. "But I know my people. I know what humans do when someone hurts our own. They will come. Every single one of them will come." He was right. Across human space, ships received the message, and one by one they turned towards 7B. Captain was hauling cargo between Earth and Mars when she heard the call. Without hesitation, she ordered her crew to dump their cargo into space. 3 million credits worth of electronics floating away into the void. Her ship was now lighter and faster. She pushed her engines to maximum and set course for 7B. Research vessel Curious Mind was studying a distant nebula when Dr. Shin received the message. He had no weapons on his ship. He had no military training, but he had a medical bay and supplies. "We're going," he told his team. "Those people need doctors." The retired battleship Hammer of Saul had been sitting in a museum dock for 20 years. Within 2 hours of the distress call, a crew of volunteers had powered up its ancient engines. The ship was old and slow, but its weapons still worked. They would arrive late, but they would arrive. Transport ships, mining vessels, private yachts, exploration craft. Hundreds of ships across dozens of systems heard the call and responded. Many of them had no chance of reaching 7B in time. They came anyway. Because that was what humans did. When someone hurt their people, they responded, all of them together. On the Indomitable, Admiral received a communication request from an unexpected source. The display showed the symbol of the Galactic Concord. "Put it through," he ordered. The screen flickered and a face appeared. It was not a human face. Ambassador of the Concord was a creature with compound eyes and clicking mandibles. He was the Concord's official representative to humanity. "Admiral Lee," said, his voice translated by computer into cold, mechanical English. "We have intercepted your distress signal and your subsequent broadcast. We must discuss this situation." "There is nothing to discuss, Ambassador. My people are dying. I am going to save them." "Admiral, please consider the larger picture. The Dominion is not a member of the Galactic Concord. We have no treaty with them, no diplomatic relations. Responding with military force could destabilize the entire region and draw the Concord into an unwanted conflict. His hands tightened into fists. Ambassador, do you know how many people live on 7B? I believe the colony population is approximately 800. 847, interrupted. Each one of them has a name. Each one of them has a family. Each one of them is a human being with hopes and dreams and people who love them. Admiral, in the grand scale of galactic politics, 800 lives is a very small number. Perhaps it would be wiser to negotiate with offer them the mining rights they clearly want, a diplomatic solution. You want me to abandon my people? His voice was ice. You want me to let them die so that you can have peace with murderers? I want you to see reason, said, his compound eyes gleaming. The Conquered has maintained peace for 10,000 years by avoiding unnecessary conflicts. Your species is young. You do not understand how these things work. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. Admiral Lee stepped closer to the screen. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word carried the weight of absolute certainty. Ambassador, let me explain something to you. Something that you and your Conquered have never understood about humanity. He paused, letting the silence stretch. There is no acceptable number. There is no sacrifice for the greater good. If you take one human life, we will move mountains to bring justice. If you take 800, we will shake the stars themselves. We do not calculate losses. We do not negotiate with those who murder our children. We do not accept. We do not forgive. We do not forget. He leaned even closer, his eyes burning with fury. Every single person on 7B matters to us, not as statistics, not as numbers on a chart, as human beings, as our family. And when someone hurts our family, Ambassador, we do not discuss the larger picture. We do not consider diplomatic solutions. We come for them with everything we have. And we do not stop until the debt is paid. Ambassador was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was uncertain. You would risk war for 800 people. I would burn this galaxy to ashes, replied, for one. He cut the transmission. Around him, his bridge crew was silent. Then slowly they began to clap. The sound spread through the ship as the message was shared. Hundreds of voices cheering. Thousands of fists raised. Humanity was coming. And nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. The underground tunnels were cold and dark. They had been built for mining, not for hiding. But now, 203 survivors huddled in the deepest chambers, listening to the sounds of destruction above. Sat with her back against the rough stone wall, trying to stop her hands from shaking. She was 22 years old. She had been a mining engineer for just 3 months. Now she was covered in blood and dust, and her father was dead. She had watched him die. He had pushed her into a maintenance shaft when the soldiers came through their street. He had stood in front of the shaft, blocking their view, giving her time to escape. She had heard the plasma shots. She had heard him fall. She had kept crawling, tears streaming down her face until she reached the tunnels. Now she sat in the darkness, surrounded by other survivors. Some were crying. Some were praying. Some just stared at nothing, their minds broken by what they had seen. The beacon was still transmitting. Everyone knew that help was coming, but it would take 9 hours, 9 impossible hours. And Park had made it to the tunnels. His leg was badly hurt and had taken 3 plasma burns to his chest and arms, but they were alive. They sat near, sharing the same exhausted silence. We can't just sit here and wait, said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. What choice do we have? An older man asked. His name was, and he had worked maintenance in the colony for 20 years. They control the surface. They have ships, soldiers, weapons. We have nothing. We have these tunnels, said. She stood up, ignoring the pain in her muscles, the fear in her heart. We know every meter of them, the don't. We have mining equipment, explosives for rock blasting, industrial lasers. We can fight back. Fight back, a woman laughed bitterly. Against those monsters, did you see them? They're 3 meters tall, they have armor, plasma rifles. I saw them, cut her off. Her voice was hard now, hard like the rock around them. I saw them kill my father. I saw them murder children in the streets. And I am telling you, I am not going to sit here and wait for them to find us. I am going to make them pay for every step they take into these tunnels. The survivors were silent, then spoke up. She's right, he said. His voice was weak from pain, but his eyes were clear. We can't just hide. Sooner or later, they'll come down here looking for us. And when they do, we need to be ready. He turned to, I'm a soldier, I know tactics, but I'm too hurt to lead. You seem to know these tunnels better than anyone. What do you have in mind? Felt the weight of every eye on her. She was not a leader. She was not a soldier. She was just a girl who had lost her father and was too angry to be afraid anymore. The main tunnel has only 2 entrances from the surface, she said. We collapse one. The other becomes a kill zone. We set up ambush points every 100 meters, booby traps, cave-ins. We make them bleed for every centimeter. Stood up slowly, his old joints creaking. I know where the explosives are stored, he said. Industrial charges for clearing rock. They'll work on just as well. Others began to stand. An engineer named offered her knowledge of the ventilation systems. A technician named said he could modify mining lasers into weapons. A nurse named Bora began organizing the wounded and the children into a protected area at the deepest point of the tunnels. For the first time in hours, hope flickered in the darkness. They worked fast. Time was their enemy. They would not wait long before coming to finish the job. Led a team to the eastern entrance and set charges. The explosion brought down 100 tons of rock, sealing the tunnel forever. Now there was only one way in and one way out. At the remaining entrance, they built barricades from mining equipment and spare metal. They set traps in the narrow passages. They placed explosive charges at key points, connected to triggers that could be pulled from a distance. The first patrol came after 4 hours. Watched them from the shadows, her heart pounding. There were 5 of them, tall and confident, their weapons raised. They thought they were hunting scared prey. They did not expect resistance. The first soldier stepped on a pressure plate. The explosion ripped through the tunnel, killing 2 of them instantly. The others scattered, firing blindly into the darkness. A modified mining laser cut through the smoke, taking down a third. The remaining 2 retreated, leaving their dead behind. Felt something she had not expected, pride. They had hurt the enemy. They had shown that humans would not die quietly. But she knew this was just the beginning. They returned in force. 20 soldiers, then 30, then 50. They pushed deeper into the tunnels, taking losses with every advance. The humans fell back, collapsing tunnels behind them, making the enemy fight for every meter. Died in the 5th hour. He had stayed behind to trigger a cave-in, knowing he would not have time to escape. 15 soldiers were buried with him. His last words, transmitted over a small radio, were simple: make them remember us. In the 6th hour, a 17-year-old girl led a group of 12 children through the ventilation shafts. The shafts were too small for adults, too small for. She guided the children through the darkness, keeping them quiet, keeping them calm, while above them, the battle raged. She got them to a sealed emergency bunker at the far end of the tunnel network. They would be safe there until help arrived. Went back to help the others. By the 7th hour, they had reached the main defensive line. The fighting was brutal. Mining lasers against plasma rifles, explosive charges against alien armor. Bodies fell on both sides. Park, despite his wounds, fought at the front. He had lost too much blood. He could barely stand. But his aim was still true, and his hands were still steady. He killed 3 warriors before a plasma bolt tore through his stomach. found her brother lying against the tunnel wall, blood pooling beneath him. She crawled to him, ignoring the gunfire, ignoring the danger. "I told you to stay back," whispered. A tired smile crossed his face. "You never listen." "I couldn't leave you," said, tears streaming down her face. "Help is coming," said, his voice was fatting. "I heard the signals, they're close. 300 ships, 300, humanity is coming for us." "You'll be there to see them," promised. But shook his head. "No, but you will, you and the others, you have to survive, you have to tell them what happened here, tell them about everyone who fought." He coughed, blood on his lips. "Tell them we didn't give up, tell them we made them pay." "I will," promised, "I swear." Smiled one last time. "I'm proud of you, sister." His eyes closed, his breathing stopped, and was alone. But there was no time to grieve. They were still coming. The fight was not over. By the 8th hour, only 67 humans remained alive. They had retreated to the deepest chamber, the last defensible position. They had them surrounded. It was only a matter of time. Stood at the front, a plasma rifle taken from a dead enemy soldier in her hands. Beside her stood and the other survivors. They were exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered. But they were still standing. "One more hour," said. "That's all we need. One more hour and our people will be here." From the darkness ahead, they could hear the regrouping. The final assault was coming. Looked at the faces around her. Miners, engineers, teachers, nurses, children, not soldiers. Just ordinary people who had been pushed too far and had discovered something inside themselves they never knew existed. "They think we're prey," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They think we're weak. They think we'll break." She raised her weapon. "Show them what humans are made of." A roar went up from the survivors, not a sound of fear, a sound of defiance. One more hour. They could do this. They had to. Overlord stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger, and watched his soldiers work. The planet below was beautiful in its destruction. Fires burned across the surface. Smoke rose into the atmosphere. The human colony was almost completely destroyed. He felt satisfaction. The Dominion had not survived 10,000 years by being gentle. They took what they wanted and they crushed anyone who tried to stop them. These humans were no different from any other weak species they had encountered. A little resistance, a little struggle, and then death. The rare minerals on this world would make the Dominion rich. The cost had been minimal. A few soldiers lost to primitive traps and desperate defenders. Nothing that mattered. His tactical officer approached, clicking his mandibles nervously. "Overlord, our ground forces report that a small group of humans remains alive in the underground tunnels. They continue to resist." "How many?" asked. "Less than 100. Made a sound that might have been laughter. "Finish them. We have wasted enough time on this insignificant world." The tactical officer hesitated. "Overlord, there is something else. Our sensors have detected unusual activity in hyperspace. Multiple signatures approaching from the direction of human territory." "How many ships?" The officer checked his console. His mandibles stopped clicking. His compound eyes widened. For a long moment he did not speak. "Well," demanded. 347 vessels, Overlord, and more are still appearing." Turned slowly to face the main. "Show me." The screen flickered and then filled with stars. At first saw nothing unusual. Then, one by one, bright flashes of light began to appear. Each flash was a ship dropping out of hyperspace. They came in waves, emerging from the darkness like an angry swarm. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and behind them, civilian vessels of every size and type. Cargo haulers armed with mining lasers, research ships with improvised weapons, transport vessels loaded with volunteers, even a massive old battleship that looked like it had been pulled from a museum. 347 ships, and the number kept growing. The fleet had 40 warships, had thought that was more than enough to handle any response from these primitive newcomers to the galaxy. He had been wrong. "Overlord," the tactical officer whispered, "they are hailing us." Straightened his spine. He was a warrior. He had faced death many times. He would not show fear in front of his crew. Put it through. The changed again, showing a human face. An older male with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore a military uniform covered in medals and insignia. "Forces," the human said, his voice flat and hard. "This is Admiral Lee of the United Human Fleet. You have attacked our people. You have murdered our citizens. You have killed our children. I am giving you one chance. Surrender unconditionally in the next 9 minutes, or every ship in your fleet will be destroyed. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose." The transmission ended. Stared at the screen for a long moment. Around him, his officers were silent. They had never seen anything like this. No species had ever responded to an attack with such speed, such numbers, such anger. "Overlord," the tactical officer said carefully, "perhaps we should consider—" "Consider what?" interrupted. "Surrender to these primitives. We are the Dominion. We do not surrender. We do not flee. We fight and we win." He turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, battle formation. Target the largest human vessels first. We will break their fleet and teach them the price of defiance." The fleet moved into position. 40 warships, each one bristling with plasma cannons and missile launchers. They had crushed 100 worlds with this force. They had never been defeated in open combat. The human fleet approached, spreading out into a wide formation. Their ships were smaller, less advanced, less armored. By all logic, they should win this battle easily. But logic had never met human anger. "Fire," ordered. Plasma bolts streaked across the void. Missiles followed, leaving trails of fire in the darkness. The first human ships took hits. One destroyer exploded. Another lost half its hull. A cruiser began venting atmosphere. But the human ships did not fall back. They did not retreat. They pushed forward, closing the distance, their own weapons blazing. And then understood the truth. He understood why the humans had come with 300 ships when 40 should have been enough. It was not about tactics. It was not about odds. It was about something else entirely. It was about rage. The humans fought like nothing had ever seen. A damaged frigate, engines failing, turned its nose toward a cruiser and accelerated. The collision destroyed both ships, but the human crew had chosen death over retreat. A cargo hauler, armed with nothing but mining lasers, dove into the heart of the formation, firing wildly, drawing attention away from the human battleships behind it. A human cruiser took a direct hit to its reactor core. Any sane crew would have abandoned ship. Instead, they set their engines to maximum and rammed the nearest destroyer, detonating their reactor manually as they struck. The explosion was blinding. 2 ships died with them. This was not war, this was vengeance. "Overlord," the tactical officer shouted over the sound of alarms, "we've lost 18 ships. The humans are not stopping." "Then destroy more of them," roared. But there were too many. For every human ship that fell, 2 more took its place. They swarmed the fleet, overwhelming them with sheer numbers and absolute determination. The eternal hunger shook as a human battleship opened fire at close range. Armor plates tore away. Systems failed. Crew members screamed and died. "Overlord, we must retreat," the tactical officer begged. "The fleet is destroyed, we cannot." A human cruiser appeared directly in front of them, firing everything it had. The eternal hunger's shields collapsed. The bridge was engulfed in fire and smoke. He lay on the burning deck, watching his ship die around him. Through the shattered, he could see the human fleet finishing off the last of his forces. 38 warships, destroyed in 11 minutes. 2 ships remained. They had dropped their shields, stopped firing, and were broadcasting surrender signals. Watched as human boarding pods attached to the surrendering ships. He expected the humans to take prisoners, to follow the rules of war that most civilized species observed. He was wrong. The human admiral's voice echoed through space one final time. You surrendered too late. Your people killed 780 of ours. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And we do not take prisoners from murderers. The two remaining ships exploded, destroyed by human weapons at point-blank range. Died with the sound of that explosion in his ears. His last thought was simple. He had made a terrible mistake. He had attacked a species that did not calculate acceptable losses, a species that did not forgive those who killed their own. He had awakened something terrible. And now his entire fleet was gone. On the surface of 7B, the 67 survivors heard the sounds of battle in orbit. They heard the explosions, the transmissions, the chaos, and then they heard something else. Human voices on their radios. 7B survivors, this is Captain Han of the Marine Rescue Corps. We are coming to get you. Hold on, we are almost there. Lowered her weapon. Around her, the other survivors began to cry, not with fear this time, with relief, with joy, with the knowledge that they were not alone. Humanity had come, just as they always did. The first human boots touched the surface of 7B less than 20 minutes after the last ship was destroyed. Captain Han led her Marines through the burning ruins of the colony, stepping over rubble and bodies, searching for survivors. The smoke was thick. The air smelled of death and fire. Had seen battlefields before, but this was different. This was not a military base that had been attacked. This was a home, a community, a place where families had lived and worked and dreamed. And it had been destroyed. Her team found the entrance to the underground tunnels. The bodies of soldiers lay scattered around it, proof that the colonists had not died without a fight. Felt a surge of pride mixed with grief. These had been civilians, miners and engineers, people who had never trained for war, and they had stood against an alien invasion force and made them pay in blood. Captain, one of her soldiers called out, "We've got movement ahead, looks like survivors." Moved forward carefully. The tunnel was dark, lit only by emergency lights and the glow of dying fires. She could hear voices now, human voices, speaking in tired whispers. She turned a corner and found them. 67 people, huddled in a large chamber at the deepest point of the tunnel network. They were covered in blood and dust. Some were wounded badly. Some were barely conscious. Children clung to adults, too exhausted to cry anymore. At the front of the group stood a young woman, barely more than a girl, holding a plasma rifle. Her eyes were hard, her hands steady. She looked like she had walked through fire and come out the other side as something stronger. Removed her helmet, letting the survivors see her face. "I'm Captain Han," she said softly. "United Human Marines, we're here to take you home." The young woman stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, she lowered her weapon. Her hard expression cracked just for a second, showing the exhausted, grieving girl underneath. "What took you so long?" she asked. Walked forward and knelt beside her. "We came as fast as we could. I'm sorry we weren't faster." The young woman shook her head. "Don't be sorry, be angry, stay angry." Her voice grew stronger. "Never let them forget what happens when they touch us." Nodded, she understood. She felt the same anger burning in her own heart. "What's your name?" "I promise you the galaxy will never forget what happened here, and they will never forget what you and your people did. You held them off for 9 hours with mining equipment and courage. You made them pay for every life they took. That's not just survival, that's victory." Looked at the survivors behind her, at who had lost her brother, at who had saved the children, at all the others who had fought and bled and refused to give up. "It doesn't feel like victory," she said quietly. "It never does," replied. "But it is. And the people who died here, the ones who sacrificed themselves so others could live, they won too. Because you're still here. because their names will be remembered, because of what their deaths mean to every human in the galaxy. Medical teams arrived and began treating the wounded. Evacuation shuttles landed on the surface, ready to take the survivors to the fleet. Slowly, carefully, the 67 survivors of 7B were brought out of the darkness and into the light. Admiral Lee met them personally when they arrived aboard the Indomitable. He stood at attention as each survivor passed, saluting them as if they were heroes returning from war, because that was exactly what they were. 2 weeks later, Admiral Lee stood before the Galactic Concord Assembly. 47 species had gathered to discuss what the Concord called the 7B incident. Many of them were outraged. They called humanity's response excessive, disproportionate, a violation of interstellar norms. Ambassador spoke first. The destruction of the fleet was an act of war. 40 warships were destroyed. No prisoners were taken. This is barbarism. This is exactly the kind of behavior that the Galactic Concord was created to prevent. Other ambassadors voiced their agreement. A tall, crystalline being said that humanity should be sanctioned. A floating cloud of gas suggested that human expansion should be limited. A species of telepathic plants called for a formal investigation. Admiral Lee listened to all of it in silence. Behind him, a holographic display showed the names and faces of the 780 humans who had died on 7B. They scrolled slowly across the screen, one after another. Men, women, children, old and young, each one a life that had been taken. When the Concord finally fell silent, Admiral Lee stepped forward. "You call us excessive," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "You tell us that our response was disproportionate, that we should have negotiated, that we should have calculated the acceptable losses and acted accordingly." He paused, looking at each alien diplomat in turn. "But you don't understand what humans are." He gestured to the holographic display behind him. Every name on this screen was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. They were not statistics. They were not numbers on a chart. They were people, our people. And when someone kills our people, we do not discuss acceptable losses. We do not consider the bigger picture. We come for the ones responsible, and we do not stop until justice is done. He stepped closer to the center of the chamber. "The killed 780 human beings, men, women, and children. They bombed our homes. They shot our families in the streets. They hunted our survivors through tunnels like animals." His voice grew harder, colder. "And you are angry that we destroyed their fleet. You are upset that we did not take prisoners." He shook his head slowly. "Let me make something very clear to every species in this chamber, every empire, every federation, every single world that can hear my voice." He raised his hand and pointed at the faces scrolling behind him. These people mattered, not because they were many, not because they were important, not because their death served some greater purpose. They mattered because they were human, and every human life, from the greatest admiral to the smallest child, is worth more to us than all the treaties and diplomatic relationships in the galaxy. The chamber was silent. No one moved, no one spoke. "So let me give you a warning," Admiral Lee continued. "Not a threat, a promise. If any species anywhere in this galaxy attacks a human colony, we will respond. If you kill one of our people, we will come for you. If you threaten our families, we will build 1,000 warships. If you think we are weak because we are new, because we are few, because we are young." He leaned forward, his eyes blazing with cold fire. "Test us." He let the words hang in the air for a long moment. Then he straightened. "We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. But we will not apologize for defending our own. And we will not pretend that the lives of our people are worth less than your political comfort. They learned this lesson the hard way. I suggest the rest of you learn it from their example, so that you never have to learn it from yours." He turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. In the years that followed, no species attacked a human colony again. Pirate factions avoided human shipping lanes. Even the great empires of the galaxy began treating human diplomats with unprecedented respect. The story of 7B spread across the stars. The story of 847 people who were attacked without warning. The story of 203 survivors who fought back with mining equipment and courage. The story of 67 souls who held out for 9 impossible hours until help arrived. The story of who sacrificed himself to bury 15 enemies in stone. Of Park, who fought until his last breath to protect his sister. Of who turned her grief into strength and led ordinary people to do extraordinary things. The galaxy learned a simple truth. Humans did not calculate acceptable losses. Humans did not negotiate with those who harmed their own. Humans remembered every name, every face, every life. And when you hurt them, when you made them bleed, they did not stop coming until the debt was paid in full. On the first anniversary of the attack, a memorial was built on 7B, a simple stone monument with 780 names carved into its surface. Survivors and family members gathered to remember those who had fallen. Park stood before her brother's name, tracing the letters with her fingertips, stood beside her, silent and strong. He would be proud, said quietly, of everything you've done, everything you've become. Nodded. She had become an advocate for colony defense, pushing for better early warning systems and faster response times. She had before the Human Senate, the Galactic Concord, and a dozen other bodies. She had told the story of 7B to anyone who would listen. I keep my promise, she said. I tell them about everyone who fought, about everyone who died. I make sure the galaxy remembers. She looked up at the stars, at the vast darkness that had once seemed so empty and cold. And they do remember, she continued. Every species in the Concord knows what happens when you attack humanity. They know we don't give up, we don't back down, we don't forget. She smiled, a sad but proud smile. We take care of our own, always. Above them, human ships patrolled the stars, watching, protecting, ready. Because that was what humanity did. Now end.